Hey everybody, my name is Kevin Olmsted, and today I'm going to be looking at leading healing from generational trauma and looking at the literature to see what that tells us about how we can best support First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people in an educational system, and what this means for school leaders and educators working towards reconciliation. Generational trauma among Indigenous people in Canada is deeply rooted in colonization and policies such as the residential school system. According to Bombay, Matheson, and Anisman, trauma is not only experienced by individuals, but can be transmitted across generations through multiple pathways. These include a heightened stress response, changes in parenting practices, and passing down of collective memories of trauma. In addition, Fast and Colin Vezina explain that trauma is both historical and ongoing. Experiences of racism and systematic inequities continue to impact Indigenous communities today. This means that trauma is not something in the past. It continues to shape the well-being, identity, and experiences of students in schools today. One of the key challenges identified in the literature is that trauma can significantly impact student learning, behavior, and overall well-being. However, schools often approach these challenges through a Western lens that focuses on individual behavior or psychological issues. Barrage, Momfer, and Gahn found that Indigenous survivors describe trauma in relational terms, meaning it affects families, communities, cultures, and identity, not just the individuals. This creates a disconnect in schools where systems may overlook the broader social and cultural context of students' experiences. As a result of this, students may feel misunderstood, disconnected, or unsupported within the education system. The literature also challenges us to rethink how we understand trauma and healing. Rather than viewing it as an individual condition, Indigenous perspectives emphasize that trauma is relational and collective. Healing, therefore, must also be relational and grounded in culture, family, and community. Barrage highlights that survivors often identify healing through reconnecting with nature, culture, and spirituality. This shifts the focus from deficit-based model, so what is wrong, to a strength-based model that recognizes resiliency, identity, and community as central to healing. Research also provides a clear direction on what effective healing approaches can look like. Marsh and colleagues emphasize the importance of blending Indigenous healing practices with Western approaches. For example, they describe integrating traditional teachings, ceremonies, and the involvement of elders with evidence-based models like seeking safety. These approaches are holistic, addressing emotional, physical, mental, and spiritual well-being. This concept is often referred to as two-eyed seeing, where both Indigenous and Western ways of knowing are valued and used together. For educators and leaders, this highlights the importance of culturally grounded and community-driven approaches to supporting students. Schools play a critical role in supporting healing from generational trauma. Middleton, Moz, and colleagues argue that educational systems must create environments that are both trauma-informed and culturally safe. This means recognizing that students' behaviors may be responses to trauma rather than simply disciplinary issues. It also means building a strong, trusting relationship and ensuring that students feel respected and valued. Importantly, the focus should shift towards resilience and strengths rather than deficits. In this way, school can become spaces that actively support healing rather than unintentionally reinforcing harm. While classroom practices are important, the literature makes clear that meaningful change must happen at the leadership and system level. Andrews and colleagues describe a school transformation project that improves student and teacher well-being by integrating cultural knowledge, strengthening leadership, and embedding mental health supports within the school. Their findings showed that sustainable change requires collaborating with community members and elders and ongoing professional learning for teachers. For school leaders, this means addressing generational trauma not as an add-on, but embedded into the school culture itself. Overall, the literature suggests several key directions for moving forward. First, schools must center Indigenous voices, knowledge, and perspectives in their work. Second, there must be a strong focus on relationships, community, and cultural connection as foundations for learning and well-being. And third, educators must shift from a deficit-based thinking to strength-based approaches that recognize resiliency and identity. Finally, it's important to understand that healing is ongoing and collective, and that educational systems have an important role to play in supporting this process. In reflection, when I was conducting this literature review, this helped my understanding of generational trauma. And one of the key takeaways was viewing trauma as relational and collective rather than just individual. So this kind of challenged my previous thinking and highlighted the limitations that we have in our own school approaches that I see. I was also struck by the emphasis on the cultural identity, community, and resilience as central to healing. And I think that moving forward, this learning will influence me as a school leader because I'll be able to try to reinforce the importance of a culturally grounded, relationship-focused practice within schools. Also highlights a need for ongoing learning, reflecting, and collaborating with the Indigenous communities. Thank you very much for listening. Please see my sources. I appreciate the time you took to watch this video.